In 1969, a group of astronauts changed the world. They ride the biggest rocket ever built to the moon. It's the culmination of more than 10 years of space pioneering and the foundation for more than 4 decades of exploring worlds beyond our own. This is the story of our greatest adventure. NASA fulfills John Kennedy's dream to land men on the moon and bring them back alive.
Neil, Buzz, and Mike, I want you to know that I think I'm the luckiest man in the world in welcoming you back to Earth.
But Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin clocked just 2.5 hours walking on the surface. Their successful mission paves the way for fellow astronauts to embark on more advanced lunar exploration.
Trainers came to us one day and said, "We're going to teach you what you need to know when you get to the moon." We said, "Hey, we know. We're going to put up the flag, we're going to talk to the president, we're going to come home." They said, "Yeah, that's what you think."
Just 4 months after the first landing, Apollo 12 carries Pete Conrad, Richard Gordon, and Alan Bean to the moon.
257 feet coming down 5.
Unlike Apollo 11, Conrad and Bean make a pinpoint landing.
Contact light, outstanding, man.
The area is called the Ocean of Storms, the site of an ancient volcano. They spend nearly 8 hours collecting 75 pounds of moon rocks.
Pete, you're 34 minutes into the EVA and you're right on the nominal timeline.
We were tired, we were dirty. It went by pretty quick, but we did a lot of hard work.
From an unmanned probe that landed 2 years earlier, they retrieve parts that contain a remarkable discovery. Bacteria from Earth seem to have survived in the vacuum of space.
When you're the only 2 people on the moon and everybody else is 240,000 miles some other direction, you're an explorer.
For the next moon mission, NASA geologists choose a more dangerous landing site, the heavily cratered lunar highlands.
I've always thought that our crew, Apollo 12, could have flown any mission as good as anybody else, probably, except 13.
NASA makes scientific research a primary mission objective. The crew of Apollo 13 takes special training in lunar geology. The rocks astronauts bring back could begin to answer questions about where the moon came from.
The geology training was really a lot of focus on the protocol of sampling. So when we got back, they could understand where they come from and how they fit into the context of the area.
The commander of Apollo 13 is Jim Lovell, a veteran of 2 Gemini missions and Apollo 8. He's NASA's most experienced astronaut.
One of the things I wanted to do before I retired from active spaceflight was to land on the moon. That's the reason why I had got into NASA in the first place. That was the whole thing. So I was looking forward to 13.
Jim Lovell's crew has been training together for almost a year, even before being assigned to Apollo 13. But the team is broken up just 3 days before launch. Jack Swigert is a last-minute replacement when the command module pilot is exposed to the measles.
On every flight, we ended up getting pressed into the corner. There were a lot of last-minute details. Changes were still being made.
Swigert joins the 2 lunar landers, Jim Lovell and Fred Hayes. Their destination, a difficult landing site in the moon's Fra Mauro Hills.
You know, when you're an astronaut, you've got to buy into a lot of risk. Nobody's going to save you if the hardware doesn't work. You buy into that stuff if you're going to be an astronaut. If you can't buy into it, don't be an astronaut.
T-minus 25 seconds and counting, and Apollo 13 is go.
You know, you're sort of relaxed. because there's only two things that are going to happen. Either it's going to go as planned, or something is going to go wrong. This was my last chance to get to the moon.
Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. The Saturn V building up to 7.6 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
This is Mission Control Houston. We appear to have a good first stage at this point. Flight Dynamics Officer says the trajectory looks good. We show a 1/2 mile in altitude at this time.
Apollo 13 is just the 8th launch of the most powerful rocket ever built.
Roll complete and we're pitching. Roger that. Stand by for mode 1 Bravo.
Gene Kranz monitors all aspects of the launch from his desk at Mission Control in Houston.
The flight director's job description is very simple. It's only one sentence long. It says to take any actions needed for crew safety and mission success. Crew safety is number 1, mission success is number 2.
Fred, one more thing on the TV. If you could come down to F-22 again.
I was pretty busy getting equipment out, and occasionally getting a chance to sneak a peek out the window. Even though you've seen pictures and footage from previous flights, it's unbelievable when you're there looking out.
More than halfway to the moon, the crew broadcasts live from the spaceship for television viewers on Earth.
Okay, a couple of square packages I now have my hand on here are our emergency oxygen supplies.
The astronauts don't know the networks aren't carrying their broadcast. Missions to the moon are becoming routine, and not just for the public.
The controllers said they're bored to death because really it was, everything was going right down the flight plan perfectly.
The shift rotations at Mission Control had come off very smoothly. Everything was on track.
Just about ready to close out our inspection of Aquarius and get back for a pleasant evening at Odyssey. Good night.
As the crew prepares for 7 hours of sleep, Mission Control makes one last routine request.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like it to stir up your cryo tanks.
This is where we turn on some fans in the oxygen tanks to basically stir them up to make them uniform so we can measure them. Jack Swigert acknowledged our request for the stir, and
Okay. Stand by.
Swigert then threw 2 switches.
A light came on that said there was something wrong with your electrical system. But before we could digest that information, 2 more lights came on that said 2 out of 3 of your fuel cells had just died.
It was now 55 hours, 55 minutes and 4 seconds from launch. My voice loops come alive. Hey, flight, you've had a computer restart.
Roger, restart.
Another one says antenna switch. Another one says main bus interval. And then down from the spacecraft, level calls.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Can I say again, please? Houston, we've had a problem.
Lights were coming on, noise all over, jets were firing. I had no idea what was going on. I looked up at Fred Hayes. I could tell from his expression he had no idea.
RCS system, cryogenics, electrical power, AC power, DC power.
I quickly looked at Jack Swigert. His eyes were as wide as saucers. He didn't know what was occurring.
We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there.
I thought that we've had another power glitch. We'd had 2 earlier in my shift. And we're going to solve this problem quickly and get back on track.
Mission Control, of course, was being couple 100,000 miles away was a little bit slower in realizing what was happening.
They were chasing down a trail that said it was an instrumentation problem.
Voice communications was solid, but the telemetry made absolutely no sense. But the real impact came when Jim Lovell was looking out the hatchman and says, "Hey, Houston."
Yeah, that's good for the AC. And it looks to me, looking out the hatch, that we are venting something. We are venting something out into space.
I could see a sea of debris around us, of little twinkly things moving out away from the spacecraft, which I'm assuming is frozen oxygen.
Now, Jack, is that right? Roger, we copy your venting.
I was in mission control, and Jim Lovell said, "We got a problem," and he was right. I thought we'd lost him when I saw that second oxygen tank leaking out.
We were in serious, serious trouble.
From then on, it was survival mode.
Okay, now let's everybody keep cool. Let's solve the problem, but let's not make it any worse by guessing.
What they do know is bad enough. Both oxygen tanks are losing pressure quickly. 2 of 3 fuel cells are dead. Without oxygen, the remaining fuel cell won't last long.
The quantity indicator on the second oxygen tank was moving downward. Not very fast, but nevertheless diminishing. And so it was apparent that we were going to lose that second oxygen tank.
The command module is dying. Its fuel cells need oxygen to produce electricity, and the crew needs oxygen to breathe. Their only hope is the lunar module.
I realized we were shortly going to be out of oxygen, and they were going to have to use the lunar module as a lifeboat to get home.
The lunar module has its own oxygen and power, but it's only equipped to support 2 people for 2 days. It's going to take 4 days to get 3 astronauts back to Earth. Every minute is critical.
Very long procedure, Fred. We figure we've got about 15 minutes worth of power left in the command module, so we want you to start getting over in the LEM and getting some power on that.
Following standard procedure, it should take lunar module pilot Fred Hayes 2 hours to activate the LEM.
I drifted down. We had our activation checklist that we used. As I went through the checklist, draw a big X through whole sections and move on.
With just moments to spare, Hayes powers up the lunar module. But living in the LEM means they can't fire the powerful command module rockets to reverse course back to Earth. They'll need to make the longer trip around the moon.
I made the decision that we would go around the moon as opposed to use a direct abort, because I would have to jettison my lunar module. And I didn't want to lose my lunar module, which I considered a lifeboat.
Mission control, we're looking now looking towards an alternate mission, swinging around the moon and using the lunar module power systems. That sounds like good news.
Lovell fires the engine of the lunar module to set their course around the moon and home again. The lightweight LEM offers little protection against the extreme conditions in deep space.